This content is brought to you by Fisher Improvement Technologies Online, a learning platform that includes self-paced courses, knowledge sharing, and networking opportunities for safety, quality, and performance improvement professionals. Join now for free at online.improvewithfit.com. What's up, everyone? Welcome back to the Hop In Podcast. I am Justin.
And I'm Ray.
And we have Mr. Rob Fisher joining us again. Thank you. How you doing, Rob?
Doing good. How about you guys?
Doing great. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you.
So let's jump right into it. Today I wanted to have a discussion about triggers, specifically oops and using oops as a trigger. And I'll start by telling a story that happened to me yesterday on my way into work. So I was almost in a car accident yesterday. The vehicle in front of me stopped abruptly, which caused me to slam on my brakes. I almost rear-ended them. It also caused two other vehicles behind me to come to a full stop behind me. When the first vehicle that had stopped pulled around, I noticed that they had pulled around a pink child's shopping cart toy, which is right in the middle of our lane. So instead of just leaving it there, I wanted to get it out of the road. So I put the car in park, put on my caution flashers, made sure there was no oncoming traffic, and motioned and waved to the vehicle behind me to make sure that they knew what I was doing. Ran out, grabbed the toy, threw it as hard as I could into the woods so it was out of the road, got back in my car and drove to work. It occurred to me that what I had done was recognized that there was something outside of programs, procedures, or the situation that as I expected it to be, and I stopped and I did something about it. There could have been any number of bad things that could have happened. A child could have ran out into the road to try and get that toy and get hit by a car that's doing 60 miles an hour down that road. Another incident just like what had happened to me could have happened, and someone could have gotten rear-ended. Someone could have swerved to avoid it and gotten in a head-on collision. So I wanted to just start discussing oops, what that is, and maybe tell some other stories about it.
Yeah, that was a great story. You told me that yesterday, Justin, and no telling how many people drove by that and did nothing.
Exactly.
And how many times does that actually happen to people out in the field where they are outside of something and they just go around it and do nothing? So that being outside of the procedure, parameter, process of the situation as you would expect to find it, that's a knowledge-based performance mode situation. That helps organizations define unsure. That's kind of the way we put that out there to people, because if you leave unsure up to the individual, it's not that they don't stop when they're unsure, they do, but then they proceed when they think they're sure. And if they haven't gotten any outside information, they're still in knowledge-based performance mode. Any thoughts on that, Rob?
Well, yeah, I mean, we can actually take that, and I don't want to make the leap too quickly, but let's look at what's going on here in the U.S. and I'm sure in other countries related to Thanksgiving coming up. And the situation as we expected it to be isn't going to be the way we expected it to be around Thanksgiving. So if we don't understand triggers and what triggers can really do, I mean, we're all trying to socially distance. We're all trying to wear masks whenever we're around others. We're all trying to limit our contact to other people that may be exposed to the virus. And we're going to have small gatherings, small families. So Justin's family is going to gather together. Ray's family is going to gather together. My family is going to gather together, but we may not gather all together at one time. So don't let that 10-person limit think that for Thanksgiving, you don't need to pay attention to triggers
Right.
because it's a different situation. I hope I didn't take you on too much of a tangent, but I think it's important that people understand this is a vital time for the human performance or human error reduction triggers because the errors really matter. If you don't say something about somebody not wearing a mask when you really want them to wear one, if you don't say something about people being in close proximity or even shaking a hand, which we've gotten so used to, that's our normal,
Yeah.
but that's outside of the condition as it needs to be now.
Right.
So I'll just
Right.
throw that back to you guys and we can talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, no, that's an excellent point. In fact, I don't know if anybody's seen what the governor of Pennsylvania the other day put out something that encouraged people to start wearing masks in their homes. And I think that is kind of a preparatory action, so to speak, for if people do get together during the holidays so that they're already prepared to do that. Again, that's going to be something that's outside of the norm, but everything that we're going through right now is outside outside of what our normal used to be, and we're still all still trying to get used to it. And even 7-8 months down the road, there are some complex behaviors that had to change. So in order to create these new habits, it takes a lot longer to create those habits based on the complexity of the behavior from some of the research that I've done around all of the other things, including performance modes, because I wanted to find out how long does it take to change a habit? And it can take quite a long time, again, depending on the complexity of the behavior. What do you think, Justin?
Yeah, absolutely. I don't really know. I don't really have a follow on onto that. I think you guys covered it pretty well. I did want to just throw out there in case we have some people watching or listening that aren't familiar with the term triggers, what that is. So a trigger is a clue, a cue, something that tells you that you or someone else is in knowledge-based performance mode where your error rate is going to be between 1 and 2 and 1 and 10. So whenever you see a trigger or feel a trigger or notice a trigger, you want to stop and seek out help. You want to stop and do something from an outside source, if possible.
Yeah, I've long thought and said that triggers is probably one of the most sentinel things to understand about human and organizational performance. If you can understand the triggers and recognize them and respond to them appropriately, the rest of the stuff can actually start to come a little easier. The triggers is the thing that tells people that you're headed down the path that you don't want to be on.
Right.
And I'll even go a step further. So you have this group of triggers that tells you a knowledge-based performance mode. And we know how many bad things happen with someone in knowledge-based performance mode. We also have triggers for some of the other traps, triggers for stress or time pressure or high workload. So watching those, especially during these holidays, I'll circle all the way back to Justin's experience on the road. Had the car in front of him not forced everyone to a stop, had there been no oncoming traffic and the car just eased around it, there's a very high probability everyone would have just eased around it. But because it was such a drastic trigger, Justin then triggered and said, I've got to do something about this. Where if the car in front of him had just gone around it, there's a very high likelihood that all the cars drive around it until it magically disappears or someone does stop and get it. Justin, I don't want you to presuppose what you may have done, but does that sound familiar? I mean, I've driven around a lot of things that are in the road, not gotten out to fix them because of exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah, I mean, who knows? I mean, hindsight is 20/20, right?
Right.
But I mean, I would imagine that they're probably, I don't know how long it was in the road. It could have been overnight. I mean, there's no telling how many people really went around that without doing anything about it.
Well, I think you bring up a great point, Justin, and that is that on the hindsight is 2020. We also tend to use that hindsight as our blame bias.
Right.
So
Yeah.
I think you very well said that who knows what I would have done. That's an honest answer where most people, because you understand human performance and human failure and human success, where most people would have said, oh, I would have definitely stopped. But then when you ask the probing questions about have they done that in the past or have they driven past it in the past, you're going to find out that they probably have driven past.
Yeah.
Yeah. The story you told, Justin, also reminds me of a story that one of our advocates told in one of the workshops. And it was pretty powerful. And he was going to meet his wife for dinner down the road. They both worked at the same facility, but they kind of worked a staggered shift. And he said, well, I'll go get a table. So he took off, and he's driving down a divided highway that's 55 mile an hour speed limit, and it's kind of rush hour. And he sees a little 4-year-old girl walking along the side of the road. And to him, that's an oops moment. That is outside of his situation as he would normally expect to find it. Now, mind you, I said it was rush hour. He's not the only person passing by this little girl. It's possible that that people are so consumed and they're in skill-based performance mode and have tunnel vision, they don't even see the little girl. He sees her. He stops and pulls over and starts to ask her some questions. She says, I'm going to see my mama. She works down at the Pizza Hut. And he asks, well, where's your dad? Well, my daddy's upstairs sleeping. And so he's talking to her, and this guy is a big country guy. He's about 6'6", just this big country guy. While he's talking to this little girl, a mother and her daughter pull up behind his truck. And people can start to think about what some of the biasing things that might be going on in their head, because now they're responding to a different oops moment.
Right.
They see a little girl on the side of the road with this big burly guy, no telling what might go through their mind. So they're responding and pulling over. So they ask what's going on. They find out what's going on. They call the police and then take off, and he stays there with the little girl. The police show up. Come to find out, Dad works a late shift. He fell asleep, forgot to lock the front door and put the chain on. She got out, walked down the stairs. She was going to see her mom at the Pizza Hut, and the Pizza Hut was across the highway, about a quarter of a mile down the road. So, like with the toy that you stopped for, just there's no telling what could have happened when that little girl, because there's no doubt about it, she was going to cross that road. She was going to see Mama, and that was what was on her mind.
Yeah, there's definitely some fatality potential there.
Absolutely. And having that training that gentleman had of understanding what that oops trigger meant and being able to do something about it, there's a lot of power in that.
Well, I think also you guys have brought up a good point that triggers like oops are about reducing probability. You
Right.
recognize the condition and you reduce probability. Doesn't mean you eliminate every possible circumstance. It just means that you have a leg up on reducing the probability that whatever this condition is going to turn into something bad. And so circling back to the upcoming Thanksgiving, I'm sure you or myself or somebody's going to be putting out some probably humorous but real Thanksgiving trap information over the next few days, because Thanksgiving in and of itself is not it may be a tradition, but it's not a normal condition. It may be something we do every year, but it's not a routine task.
Right.
So we really have to be on our game. And one of the things that human performance, human error reduction, advanced error reduction does is it gives you a leg up on recognizing things like triggers so you can reduce the probability with your family. with your crew, with your business, that
Right.
somebody's going to make a mistake that can prove to be catastrophic. And I think that it's going to be interesting what you guys put out over the next week or so to kind of show what some of those mistakes can lead to.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, because there's countless points of data out there that show that the increase in probability for bad things happening during the times of the holidays, because all of the error traps are pretty much in play throughout the whole holiday season.
Well, and especially with Thanksgiving, again, as much as we don't like to think about it, almost everything is a first time or infrequent task.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Whether it's lifting something that's 20 pounds in and out of the oven that you do twice a year, whether it's making things with a whole bunch of people around in the kitchen that aren't normally there. There's a whole bunch of oops moments that happen during the creation of and doing of a Thanksgiving dinner, even if you're going to have a small group.
yeah. And, one of the ones we talked about that was big last week was frying a turkey, because some people only do that once a year, and some people may be doing it for the very first time ever.
Some people only ever do it once.
Yeah, that's true.
They're 0 for 1.
Yeah.
That's the ones we see on YouTube, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Because if you wrap everything else up, the rules associated with that are fairly well defined, but we kind of freelance it. Whether we misunderstand the risk or we think the risk belongs to somebody else. We talk about things like critical steps. When you're frying a turkey, there is a critical step related to the depth of the oil and whether you can put your turkey in there or not.
Yeah.
You miss that one and you put the turkey in, it's too late.
Yeah.
So, and there's a lot of things like that.
Yeah, absolutely. Good insight.
So Ray, I believe Ray has a couple slides that he can bring up for those that are watching and not just listening.
Did I take us on too much of a tangent?
No, I don't
No,
think so.
absolutely not. Absolutely not. Because it's kind of a recap. We talked about oops as a trigger. Justin started off talking about his story around oops, and we just kind of want to put names to that acronym so that people can see it. It's outside of the procedures, the parameters, process, or situation as you expect it to be. You find yourself in knowledge-based performance mode. Again, leaders tell their people all the time, hey, stop when you're unsure. An organization we were working with is, everybody has the ability to stop, and we tell them to stop when they're unsure. So our follow-up question is, well, have you told them what the definition of unsure is? And they
Usually
say,
not.
well, yeah, exactly right. Usually no. I said, so who gets to define unsure then? That person,
The individual.
and what we know about different personality tendencies as well. They'll define unsure differently. Some people don't like to be unsure at all. When some people are unsure, they have no problem stopping and getting some help. But there are those who will say, nope, I'm sure, or I think I'm sure, which again, another trigger of knowledge-based performance mode. So again, when we can define what unsure is for them, everybody understands that, hey, anytime I'm oops or outside of the procedure, parameter, process, or situation as I expect it to be, we're unsure. I've got to get some help outside of myself.
That's right. So when
Is
you're
that-
out there, sorry, go ahead, Rob.
Unsure is knowledge-based performance mode, right?
It is.
Absolutely.
So when you're out there in the workplace, no matter what it is that you may be doing, use this definition. Use this as your definition for unsure. And if you find yourself there, then please stop and seek out help from an outside source. If the oops happens and you come across a latent condition, such as what happened in the road on my way to work, do something about it. Take care of it or find someone who can. Don't leave that latent condition for someone else, because then you're just waiting for something bad to happen.
Yeah, I like to put it out to people like this. If you see something, say something and or do something. Probably both. Say something and do something, because if you don't, you have not reduced the probability that something bad can happen. But if you do, you've at least reduced the probability. May not have eliminated it, like Rob said, to Rob's point. May not eliminate everything, but we can reduce the probability that something bad happens. And that's exactly what you did, moving that toy out of the road. You reduced the probability, because as any parent knows, when a child sees their toy somewhere and that's the toy they want, nothing will stop them from going to get it.
Yeah, talk about tunnel vision there.
Yeah, and look, they're children. They don't know. All they know is their toy is somewhere where they don't want it to be, and they want it.
Yeah.
Do you guys think the average person really knows about that 50% error rate when they're unsure?
No.
I think maybe we spend some time in the future. Certainly that's a big factor in my book. But I think that once, some kind of critical mass of people understand that when we say knowledge-based, what we really mean is 50% error rate.
Right.
That should spawn some kind of different responses than you typically get, even to oops.
Yeah. I know my facilitative experiences have always been that once people find out about that error rate being 50%, there are a lot of people, experienced people doing the things that they've been doing for many, many years, have said, I never knew that. That's a game changer for me. And to hear people, that's pretty powerful. I think you've experienced it yourself, Rob, in sessions where people come up to you after and say, I never even knew that I had a 50-50 shot. And for most of the time, I've been getting lucky. They've been good, but they also recognize now that they've been getting lucky a lot of times when they have that 50-50 shot.
Yeah.
Right.
Cool.
Thank you guys for having me on.
Yeah.
Hey, thanks for being on.
Thank you so much for hopping in. Any final thoughts you want to leave us with, Rob?
No, just as we go into these new times, we need to pay more attention to what should trigger us to do something a little bit different. And the triggers, as Justin well defined them, are a good way for anybody, spouse, significant other, partner, friend, kids, business associates, to help identify those times when we're going to be vulnerable, especially during these times of change.
Great. Thank you. Any final thoughts from you, Ray?
No, that sums it up for me.
Fantastic. Well, everyone, thank you so much for joining us for another episode of the Hop In Podcast. Start using oops to define unsure for yourself today. And until next week, keep improving.